Good morning, and welcome to the United States Institute of Peace. We are very, very honored to have with us today His Holiness the 17th Gyalwang Karmapa and the head of the Karmapa School of Tibetan Buddhism. I also want to welcome and to acknowledge some of the many who have accompanied His Holiness, especially Dzongchen Panlap Rinpoche, with whom we've worked to organize this event, and who's been a wonderful partner, very enthusiastic and wonderful to work with. This is an especially auspicious occasion for me, as many years ago I had the great honor of studying with Choki Nyima Rinpoche in Kathmandu, who is a part of the same school. And so this is just wonderful to have Your Holiness here with us today at the USIP. As many of you know, His Holiness has a truly dramatic story based on your escape from Tibet in 1999, where when you traveled, and having lived in Nepal, and I know the difficulty of that passage and over those mountains, and so it is truly wonderful that you were able to do that and now reside in Dharamsala next to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We have had an important tradition here at USIP of trying to contribute to the ways in which faith leaders can be a part of the peace-building process. We have with us David Smock, who was for many years the architect of that program, and I'm very pleased to have here Susan Hayward, who runs that program now. And this is an important part of how we understand conflict needs to be understood, and the voices of faith leaders and of religious leaders like His Holiness are an especial influential and important way for us to think about these critical issues of how to build peace, of how to use compassion and wisdom especially as a foundation for understanding our way through the kind of conflicts that continue to rip our world apart. So His Holiness will make a few remarks, and then we'll have an opportunity for people to ask some questions. And with that, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Tadindelia USIP lia ane jag kokop chungbudelia ane gaushta chungs tush the kurinam del tushishang.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone who's made it possible for me to have this opportunity to visit you at the USIP, and I'm very happy to be here.
Yes. And Tadindu Zumlinia Chokhaslia Ji Kashu Zunyo Mambu Shuchi Da Payum Gore, Dwayne Junsen Dene, Mitshamegi and Sinkolia and Shidisati Kashreji Kashmji Bajidan, Batiji Shidisat Kashmi Batsum Masabedi Kadruja Tedo, that's in Zajaki, Nedanuchi, Shidegua Sada, and Danachi Mimanglia Kashre Denja Guasadi, Tedo, that Zara Nedan Chadi Gore, and then you take Send Dene, and Natsuchi Chulu Kim. That would is swim in that, Tanashing Chipsy would is swim in that, and Danashi Gangalo, Samegi Yamdo Sun Zomche, Matsu, that Chigro Chiche, the Nishiki Takandra, Langu Bego, Achik to Susilia, let some trigados.
Nowadays, our world is so filled with conflict that everyone is thinking seriously about how we can find a solution and discover a way to become at peace. This has actually become an emergency and an ever-present danger for many people throughout the world. I think that one thing that would help in this regard is if religious leaders and political leaders were to meet together to share their skills and their thinking and help one another find a solution to this.
USIP that is miseke and rishungi when that is CD chair didn't so de Arashra just we ram chonsons Digi and that Shidila Tonsin Chabatan Shidilia Shidisat Kesham Imbachi recognized Chabras Tongore some Changi and then you stand taking Santene Kandar the Shidistate Kandar Kashweji idea of Jedan Dana Singi understanding of Jibu Pingamanta Shidisade Missusugataji in Tabani on Wajedan. That's some Kuni on Waj need to check out it. The Yomber Chevelia and then Kandran Mazu G knowledge Jibu Mepemba. That Pinzu Chicken Zasin Zevik Java Wajedan Pinzung Chamzeki Java things so don't that gets me in the 2 years. The angels are teaching the Dane and Chulu Pinzu in there. Dana Singi, Dakanda, G. Miri Pinzu, Giga Pinzu, Sangrolia, that Chamzidang, Zazin Java things of Donade. She didn't she said of shit on here.
I rejoice in the existence of the USIP because this is, after all, a branch of the United States government specifically formed for the purpose of and wholly devoted to the cause of peace. I think its existence is also a proof of the recognition by this government that peace is of great importance. Of course, the idea of peace and the understanding of the necessity of peace are not enough. To achieve peace will require a complete commitment, complete devotion, and even beyond that, it will require that we first achieve peace within our own hearts. We also need to be able to extend ourselves. We need to extend ourselves to others and to other societies. We need more love, more compassion, more kindness, and much deeper sense of our interconnectedness, whether it be between different religions, between different nations, between different peoples. We need to come to a greater awareness of our interdependence and our interconnectedness.
President Dana Singh the leisure Sameki and a warm welcome summer Vataji the top of the Shirakabacho, Chesa, Yanga to Chena Shai. Thank you.
I don't have too much else to say, except again, I would want you to know how really delighted I am to be here and to have received an extremely warm welcome from your president and members of your board and all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Holiness, for your remarks. It's truly an honor to have you here. I am Susan Hayward, the Interim Director of the Religion and Peacebuilding Program here at the Institute. And we're going to open it up now for discussion. So if you have questions, please just indicate by raising your hand. And make sure that you push the speak button so that we can hear you and it gets recorded properly. And please identify yourself and your organization. But I'm going to take moderator's prerogative here and ask the first question, if I could, to get us started. So, Your Holiness, you have taken, well, first of all, let me say that what you have to say about the interdependence of people around the world and the need for us to recognize, to have the wisdom to see that interconnectivity between people is so important to the cause of peace. At USIP, we recognize the ways in which multiple factors and drivers mutually feed one another and lead to the arising of violence and of suffering. And in order to find effective and sustainable solutions to those problems, we have to see how these drivers feed one another and how we all have to play a role in helping to resolve them and transform them and bring peace. So understanding interdependence helps us understand the solutions to really addressing the factors that drive violent conflict. So I really appreciate that and connected with that. But I also wanted to ask you, you have spoken out recently in support of ordination for women within the Tibetan monastic order. And this is also something in the religion program that we've put a lot of attention on the role of women within religious traditions and the role that they can play, particularly in supporting peace. And so I wonder if you could speak a little bit about how you see women's ordination within the Tibetan order as being an issue of peace.
가시부터 community 사도 개침부를 차대 여러분이 다 간다. 근데 상계 거리야 아니지 다 분명히 망부지. 다 가시로 강에 쉬우냐지 다 가는 당벌 강에 쉬 지존난 다 강에 쉬냐. 안들이 체제 안 담아를 두사 저도 중지 다 간다 community 지금 나라리야. 지 가시로 support 체제 대서럽 주요인데 다티 개발실지 저희 유에 소식도 안드레인 주산다 지단계 포멜리아지 가슈레 full ordination 산안도 다 대한 가르쳐서는 ordination 지보만 임바 뜻이 분명히 가슈레다 간다 최소가 난기다 지 분명히 톱단 산안도 분명히 다 간다 가수의 스테이지 somewhere 다디 중국 알았어. 다들 인도산에 여름치기 우치 거리야 데벨로니슈 숨주진리야 아니 지벽 아니 지나마 상계에 나로려야지 저기 다 gelong마선한다도 full ordination 디 갸수용하기 체도 심주다 졸림 티마 나야래 들 진남부터야 댄체 나랑이 위에 진짜 김선 댄체 아니 지 보면이야 full ordination 지 도바용수 저 토야데 개천부 임베지다 자천부 임베지 지 걸리걸리지 하고 송수스 안드레 인두산에 다 달류 차를 제비민다 지단기 가르쳐야지 나중에 참매기 지 추규 참매기 딱 안들 저번 매매 토니지 개렌시아로지 뒤주주 고지 균rum부 대브레 따이면디 단도인의 뒤주 망보증 거르베 섭다를 도수협이 인두산 다 당봉엘이야 지 추규지가 나로려야 당부증 군주를 제샤위면은 걸리걸리 따대지 추규 신다주의면은 디기 가수래지 다 제수 가수래 페아로 지금 이제 라와로도 제브레 나도 인더스트리 균세되네 간다 디 균세된 딱 조디 가르쳐서나 다 보면이야 이제 잡아주는 신지기 신용 토네나데 다가는 신기 지소 나리아다 보면이 지 가수다 스테이지 somewhere 지 다 대인 비내래 간지 토린 비내 안 차상와 지당 비숨 수업으로 지금 된지식 딱 안 다는 신기엔 분명히 미세게 그런 시럽당 참지기 유바 미세지 인도산에 안 될때네 안 지소 나올이야 미세게 분명히 다 고치 상부지 셔트하기 아주 저와 첨부를
Well, first of all, the establishment of a supportive community is of Can you hear me? Okay, I guess you can now. The establishment of a supportive community is of great importance. During the Buddha's lifetime, many women who had experienced great challenges in their lives were able to gather together and form a supportive community, a sangha of ordained women, female monastics. But the issue of the reestablishment of full ordination for women in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition goes beyond simply the establishment of the full ordination itself, because it is an important stepping stone in the restoration of women's rights in using the religious or spiritual tradition of Tibetan Buddhism to do that. For this reason, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has over the last 20 or even 30 years been discussing how we can actually restore the bhikshuni, or the full monastic ordination for women in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And His Holiness's work on this and devotion to this cause has inspired me and caused me over time to begin to really understand and appreciate the great importance of the reestablishment of this ordination. The reason we've been waiting so long to do it is we wanted to put enough research into the matter so that when it is done, it will be done in an undisputably valid way, so that all lineages of Tibetan Buddhism accept it. However, at this point, 20 or 30 years into the discussion, it's evident that it would still take a long time to get everyone on board. So I feel that if one lineage begins, then the others will follow. That is my hope. So therefore, I will begin this. It's important, however, to understand that the purpose of this is to establish not only the right to full ordination, but equal rights in all aspects of Tibetan religious culture. Education, status, and rank fully equal to that of male monastics. Another reason why this is so important is that women innately have a little more wisdom and a little more kindness than men do. And so, to put it bluntly, you didn't say little? All right. I was trying to be. Women are a lot wiser and a lot kinder than men, and therefore giving them the authority to use their innate wisdom and kindness will do the Buddhist tradition a great deal of good.
I'd like to open up the conversation. Is there anybody who has a question? Bill.
Your Holiness, thank you very much. My question is a personal one, and I actually have two, if I could be greedy about this. I'd like to know about your personal, in your personal journey, your relationship with your teacher. If you could talk a little bit about that, what your teacher has meant to you, and I think if connected with that and connected with your last statement about the fact that women have so much to teach us. One of the things that I look at with some concern sometimes is that process of taking a young child from their mother at a very early point in life and just surrounded by these men who I'm sure can share many teachings and many empowerments, but I think there's also challenges involved in that process. And I wonder if you could reflect on that a little bit for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That Digolia Karislauda. Azuki Kashmir Taware Zumare, the Mangusi, that Zumandis Tawada, Tawadinde energy, that Tawasu summer with Daji, Bu Kashe Lo Sumjitwa, Tawasu in the on the Danga. Lo Dunlia, Tamashi, that Tavaso Samana Chun or Lo Dunlia, Takamum Chebre, Tenezic Pamata Cottage to Shumre. ane pamada katre tsawe jele an trawa zulya an da kanda ji maashe gegen da ji dis gembar dinde goch de yare da maashe an ji 다 부면도 지인비나 다 잠정 지하다 뒤서 캐버도 와 개버 교가 돼서 잠정 돼서 시다시다 지 제시에 말보다 디디 카고를 줬다디 안데 인두스탄에 쇼진 카고를 줘야데 이미는 당 아주 비미기다 지 가서 수균 그대로 비내래 가린 비내 당 간다를 지지당 개개 마셔 디스 차고를 줘야데 인비네 땅 아주기 가주래지 따디주지 수술 그린 첨부 임버르지랑 자첨부 임버르지 클릭을 아주지 수균 그대로 로당 돈 조금만으로 something도 삼 동당 돈 지상 아주 자첨부 지당 기겐 거로 차고学비네 수술 로첨부 차비 제리아 다 기겐 자첨부 개첨부 임버지 다버지 참사지 파말레 자첨부지 자체르지 근데지 문지 자소도 용디가 지상 아주기 Gyalwang 문진 체당한데 지 배배 루스기 Gyalwang 근지질량 Gyalwang 문진 체당한데 this mental short 지 지겐도 지금이나 마세다 지금에 Gyalwang 예버도 봐 던시 넘주르고 돌아야 봐 던시다 지 가서에 지게 수 가서다 진짜시하지 전된 시간에但因为 배배 나로리아 초지 뒤에도 여러디 인비네 야 자와 민자지 딱 간다라 콜 자와에 인사 디균세 때네 안다지 거주르다 서로다 좀 망보지 때 자와에 비균세 때네 제대로 예비 아주 무주르도 쉐위 뉴자 텔라 때세 다 더스지 강해시라나 매베서다 디스 다이미데 방 안한 쭉 라버지 차샤베나 로드윤 걸에 파마다 카트 또 충분해 당보도 로 찍스다 디스 칼라 카버시 다 드네 막 컴베서로 차지 미세다 강해를 시라매서
Well, when you become a monk or a nun, especially if you become a monk, which can happen really in somewhat early childhood, you are separated from your parents. I was separated from my parents at the age of 7 when I became the Karmapa, or was recognized as the Karmapa. And after that, I was surrounded by tutors and other old people. Of course, we all know that in general, women are more affectionate than men. They are more skillful. Detail. I don't know how detail would fit in there. Women are more affectionate than men. Men in general have a hard time showing or displaying affection. Most of my tutors and most tutors in my tradition are pretty tough. But gradually, students come to an appreciation of how kind and their tutors are, and what a tremendous contribution their tutors have made, their teachers have made to their lives. Although usually we come to this appreciation after we've grown up, and we have the perspective to realize what we gained under their guidance and teaching. So in a sense, our teachers become even more kind to us and even more influential in some ways than our parents. Another thing is that there are different ways of showing love. And in general, I would say that the way Tibetans show love is less expressly demonstrative than is true in the West. Westerners, not all, but typically tend to be more openly demonstrative. They demonstrate their love for others in their facial expressions, gestures, and so forth. Tibetans do this too, of course, but it's far more common for Tibetans to demonstrate their love for you by scolding you and trying to help you in that way. So as I gradually came to understand this, it wasn't really too hard for me. For the first year, after being separated from my parents at the age of 7, it was difficult, but then I became used to it and have not suffered too much from it.
We know you remain, and cognizant that you remain separated from your family, as they're still back in Tibet, except for your sister, who's with us here today. Other questions?
Hi, my name is Ariana Barth. I work here at the U.S. Institute of Peace, and like everyone here, I'm very grateful that you were able to join us. So there are probably 40, 45 people in this room and 40 or 45 opinions, but I'm really curious what you think about why people choose violence to achieve what they want and what we can do about that. Thank you.
가르다 민수르지비네 기dü네지 가르다지 차와지야는지 뺀다 디자 테레즈마 지구 장주에 봐서 뭐 테레즈 망부샤요 그래 망부시지 온디요 다 되게 기dü네 다 장주에를 제지게요 말에 때문에 고란주기 살론 주스 쿠유다 다가난 신기 지 롭수 갸당당 다나 신기 된대야 주수수기 저 초보 somewhere the 수다 냠도 가서 냠도 체세기다 미수이바 다 디즈기 슈겐에 된체 간단 교원조데 예비치 다 초진 다 망부지 딩산이 주다 망부슈지 다 ignorance of mariba 마셰바 될 잡으시를 시다요 소리 ngui ni zu de ma xie che de de ta de shi lo bo ran ta lo song ye bar de ge xie du sta ne a di gor tom che da cho ji bo ma do be cho ji be ge da sam lo san nan ta do cho ji be ni zu ma do ha ma go che di ya ne an do ji xie yun du sta ne an ji quran ka shu di su su be di ge ka je overwhelm de cha che an de yin du sta di gyun zen de ne ka da ji 다 지금 도수비행기 차 망부지 쇼디하러 되냐는데도 난 다나신 망부지니 양 차주의 링구 망부지니 안다지 우도 탑세를 차지 우도 탑세에서 말하다지 또 동해 슈체제 지 수수익이 다 저와 대지 미망부지기 우도 탑세 내를 교회급이야 언제 차불이야 된체 나 저어 주변에 디스 레라요 소치다 내가 준비들이야지 디스 가져오되 레라와서나 미도 딱 한다지 디스 슈겐체예요 그렇지 시와체벨에다 지 슈겐서는 장도 한다지 뉴바체예요 그렇지 통제 내가 근데가 통하다 영화로부터 망보지 언니가 그래 이미 내가 디상에 내다 하는 제비입니다 근데 망보지 마시에바다 지 몽발래야電子 용되게 여부터 지다 다는 신기 딱 간다라 지 셰비나 초그레바 니주 초그레바 마다 마셰비 디균선 된다 망보지 용되게 면도서 이제 정기 다 망보지 휴식면도
I don't think that people are born terrorists. They become terrorists through the influence of environmental factors, education and training, peer pressure, and all sorts of other social influences. And I think that people are changed into terrorists by those conditions. Nowadays, a principal factor in acts of violence and terrorism is ignorance. That people are misled, intentionally misled by leaders or teachers who don't tell them the truth, deceive them with distortions or one-sided explanations of complex situations, and by doing so repeatedly, convince their followers, who subsequently become fanatics willing to engage in acts of violence and terrorism. Also, many terrorists are living in a state of desperation. Their hopes have been dashed, and they conceive of the idea that the only way to get what they want or get what they want done is through violence. They conceive of the common misconception that violence is more powerful than peace. And so I think these are the major factors, and especially ignorance and prejudgment, prejudice, and a one-sided knowledge of a complex situation. Beyond that, I don't have much more to say about that.
Susan?
Hello, I'm Susan Lawrence with the Congressional Research Service. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about your plans for the full ordination of women in your lineage. What's the timeline for this? Do you have a timeline, and what steps have you taken already, and what do you anticipate you will need to do to make that happen? Thank you.
다들 도스래. 다 당부들이야. 저기 커미티들 수치. 다 디토네 엔지 가르에 오리네슈 치아디 차상로 아주 레코드 som으로 다 당부지 체시쇠 레코드 냐체 아주 마음벌이야 지 가르다디 마음베 범해수기다 류름 단제비 내다 니주치여에 인주사 아주 섭섭십치와 지금 내주치여에 인주사 되게 저디 차상으로 주여 지자지 아주 배수치가래 다 타임라인 데 디제 다 달로서 다 사나래 니도 주주로야 니도 주주기 다 롱골이야 다와 지지하는 다와 더 그저 수바시바다 지금 거래 디컬리아 안에 오르네션 거 줘야지 다디 오르네션 지차다 당보들 오르네션 직치야요래 다 오르네션 직 렌치 갑자기 오르네션 내야돼 로니 그린리아 데 오르네션 다 서머베다지 동바디 순제 엔디 로니 젤리아 엔 신에 가르에 풀 오르네션 데 용거하래 디네 풀 ordination 디 총사회 젤리아 다디 풀 ordination 디 총사회 젤리아 안 로쭈고 로쭈 젤리아 안 신에 아주 ordination 제샤웨기 보메 디즈 안 신달리아 지 ordination 제샤와르지 도시엔 주스타나 안 로쭈 젤리아 신에 안 베베기 보메 즈웨기 안 베베기 보메리아 지 도바테도 그렇지 시마르 딩이야 아주 상메기 다 가슈레지 갸나니 게 다지 추규 난데서물 개규 난데네 안 주면된 데 쉬지 코나주 총네 수슈야 마도베 아주 베베 부면 주제도야도 용고 말 레인주사 다디 딸 진짜 체인주사 급디디 바디 달롱 알아이나 로 십주차 레인주사 아주 고투사 말을 김센 테르다 나도 고대는 로 십중업 주 주주제주사 가서 디 치찬로요 소시 레인주사 이제 삼을 도시
Well, this year, to give you the time, there is a definite timeline. I'm sorry, who asked the, where are you? I'd like to see the, okay. There is a definite timeline for this. We're going to begin by creating a committee to oversee and record all proceedings in this, because since the first time we do it, we'll establish a precedent that will be, to some extent, will it influence, if not actually be binding for the future. We have to do it very carefully. Specifically, in the year 2016, probably in March or April, we will begin. Now, the full ordination for women has two steps. There's the post-novitiate but pre-full ordination, which is done first. And then those women who have received that and lived according to it for 2 years then become eligible for the final full ordination. Then, so we'll do the first step of this in 2016 and the second step, therefore, in 2018. Then we'll have to wait 10 years, after which those women who received the full ordination in 2018 will become what are called elders and authorized to bestow that ordination on other women. Because what we want to establish is a community of Tibetan women, fully ordained, who can bestow the ordination that they themselves have received on other women. Up to now, what has happened is some women have received the full ordination in the Chinese Buddhist tradition, but it has not yet been reestablished in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Now, if you do the math, I'll be 40 by the time these women can bestow the ordination on other women, which is another reason why I feel we can't wait any longer. Otherwise, I would wait till then I'd be 50 or 60, and so I want to get it done now.
I noticed people started getting less shy, and we had a number of hands go up. And so I'm going to collect a few questions now, and then His Holiness can answer it, and we'll hopefully have time for one more round after that. So I saw Mateo, Audrey, James. We'll do those three now, and then we'll come back for Jackie and Losong and anyone else.
Good morning, Your Holiness. The first time I saw you or met you actually was at your monastery in Tibet more than 15 years ago. And that sort of gets to my question is, what do you think are the prospects for you actually returning to Tibet, either to visit or possibly to relocate? And I suppose that brings into question the various circumstances that you see that needed to happen for a peaceful resolution between Tibet and China.
Good morning, Your Holiness. In a speech that you did at Boston, you talked about cultivating compassion. And even amongst the Buddhist community and the world in general, oftentimes we really struggle with how do we cultivate that in our lives. So what can you share that may be insightful how do we cultivate this compassion in our lives, in our personal lives, in our organizations, and how we interact with the world in general?
Good morning. It's a pleasure to meet you and members of your community, sir. I'm just curious, when you speak about the full equality of women within the hierarchy, how will that affect the search for reincarnation?
아주 나랑 표현이 마베 공리야. 근데 이게지 샤야를. 다 이게 지나려야 가르라 버스나 나랑한테 벽 딱 간진 봤으면 벽이 뷰미솔의 팬도 예비나 나랑 교벌로 용 인사를 지가 누지 이기지야래 제상 나랑 수용düne 안지 별이야 수다 카체야디 땐도 카체버지 마인버지 양가를 용토야지 이제지 다 이제 가서 자와르게 이시첨으로 두세야래 다다는 시래 안드인주스탄에 지당기 가수다지 나랑 별로 와서도 디스 가수 갈라 하버르지 다 갈라 하버서로 다지 녀로 사버르 지차려래 이내 녀로 사버 이밀 마드 바로 딱 안다지 소소다 배디 소소이다 계사 사사를 지래라 안 배배셔도 지숑디 벽 뉴주니버텔이야 다 녀와라류 되버지 또 저여비 인주스탄 다디 대단지 감매제와 제아르지 다된 아주 디셈 샤과다 쉽지 개점도 차리가 알아서 정도 안 다는 다는 신게 변한 여름 치료 지인빈다 공은 공그다지 시스마주 공그 포유 배 간진정다 시계제는 롱업주 쪽으로 인두스탄은 되게 다지 배바 망부지 대단냠도 딱 간다를 또 가지고 보이게지 유능부 미로 가시 주요의 인두스탄에 다디 유전되는 이제 보유 수술 보유려 봐 아주 삼회게 다지랑 수술 보유 봐 로트 알지 다들 로트 버치아들이야 다지 강에로 치슈에 아주 다 야외인이 내단을 차디요래 아니 자나 중게 벽이 내단디 칩스기 내단을 지리야 무지 지가래 칩스기 내단 디나는 그냥 internal somewhere about 진짜 internal 그 내단으로 무지치에 인두스탄 다 될때네 에너지 다주 미중하지 오늘은 제비나 오늘 고주디 내단디 대 가서 다시 드럼이기 엔디도 내단으로 지당 다나 신기 미지기 미리지기 가서 다시 디도 내단으로 지리야 진짜 좀 진짜 체제 고주 칩스이기 다와 차고 되는 막 법시 간단 아주지 가서다 드럼이 튜몽기 다 디도기 좋아서 말을 다 들이야 고주 통신 제아지다 지구를 제아로지 디리 충분히미나 아니 시행 아주지 수업체 돼야지 그다 다나 신기 에너지 나 다람 살아다 아니지 베이징기 버롤리아 다지 common sort of kind of understanding the 제베 통에 간다지 핀주지기들 이체 예베 통에 땅 아주지 핀주 개별 심묘디 야보지 용도야지 다디미랑 아주 다다 가수에 지 별을 로토마도 산내 가르디 버지 드리질 토데 맨저 섬도 좀 들었어
Before I left Tibet, I left behind a letter in which I wrote, if it will help Tibetans, the Tibetan people, I will soon return. So it was not my intention when I left, and has never been my intention to never return to Tibet. It's not been my intention to leave my homeland permanently. It would be a problem for me to return, certainly under the current circumstances, but I was born in Tibet, and I feel great responsibility for supporting both Tibetan spiritual and secular culture, and I've never been separated from them. It has been many years since His Holiness the Dalai Lama left Tibet, and in that time, over the last several generations, he has been joined in exile by many Tibetans. All of us who live in exile want to return, but what prevents us from returning is the issue between China and Tibet. The Chinese government sees this as a political issue and an internal issue. But in fact, it is a human issue because it concerns the plight or well-being of an entire nationality, an entire people. And if the Chinese government can come to recognize that this is an issue that in various ways impacts and concerns all humanity, and if on that basis a dialogue happens between Dharamsala and Beijing, then that might be the beginning of our being able to return.
Thank you. 다들 인지고들이야. 저거도 숨버려. 다 인지사데. 아주 지 가르쳐다지. 남주 sympathy 서머다지 미기 강해리야. understand it 서머다지. 제대로 지부만 많이 봐. 인지사데 딱 안들지. more summer that's dedication to the dana sing dedicated dana sing more involved in the action summer that did che labar do ni sa de ji ning jengge gi khasa ji de ning ji yu du ji ning jengge ru de ye chi de ji ni zu yak bu ji na ye de chi ning ji sa ru de ni zu du ja ru ji na ye de chi je je de ji gi ta kan da ta de ru ji mo yin che 간다르 닌 쟁긴 가사 코랑 닌 지위 디 차시에르 비당 다 디 코사텔이야 하는 지 소수 저 랑이 기타 간다르 예베 소르지 제 딘지 기타 간다르 차상하지 간다르 디 디돌이야 다 조다 디 동엘이야 용소르 사무지요 하루 다 딘지 샤디 니지요 다 시저 니지사 니지 차디가 아래 다 딘지 용버 제블이야 땅 아주 지당 아주 지금 좀 링비에게 가르주래 상물로 지기질이야 간다른 잡아 체대비체 잡아 예대비체 잡아 띵 삼시다 예대비체 이제 빈수 찍을 찍을 잡아 예대비체 되는 두상 아주 이렇게 잡아디 philosophical 기자 많이 비체체 interdependent values 맞다 the value way of life 다 딘지 차디가 아래 네 비스티 유즈데네 아주 니머리 미진나로리아 잡아 차대야지 네 비 유즈데네 아주 지기질이야 responsibility 랑세야 되다 신세야 돼 아주 삼번은 시지기 타대지 나 장타를 무시 매대지 랑세야 돼 신의 자신이 되지 신세야 돼 랑 자신이 되지 제자 딘지기다 understand 제베 토네 and ji karu responsibility yeche and the responsibility dia ji karu ning do de jeba zhuo de jeba da de ji yong gua ji da de de ge zhuo de jebe ning do de ne assembly a da ji ni ji yong a xi zhe de bo ji de che ge me lo so de ju chen yu kan da na zhe ge ran de am nga ge ge 다 라왕 boundary 치서마 대바 도르체 에는 치 좀불린리아 아주 connection 그리야바티 학과바 제거데 계속 차리 있어서 정도스 단 주와동 주와마다나 니서
The next question dealt with compassion. First of all, I would say that compassion is much more than sympathy or the mere understanding of others' suffering. Compassion is much more dedicated, much more involved, excuse me, much more active. So the differences are the degree of dedication, involvement, and action. In particular, compassion has no subject and object. There's no sense in true compassion, I, the feeler of compassion, am feeling compassion for you or them, the objects of my compassion. There's no distinction made, no difference felt. One sees oneself in true compassion as part of others. And one is able to put oneself in the position of others and feel their suffering. In this world, we are all interconnected. Each one of us depends upon, relies upon, and is connected to all others. This connection is so profound, so central to the very value of our lives, that it goes far beyond from being a philosophical concept. It actually is the central factor in our whole way of life. So self and others are not as separate as we think they are. We are each part of others. It is by understanding this that we will become willing, or that we can become willing, to undertake responsibility for others' well-being, and furthermore undertake that responsibility with enthusiasm and courage. I think that enthusiastic courage, that inspiration to undertake responsibility for others, is the basis of true compassion. We need to break down the wall of selfishness that usually surrounds us, and we need to change in that way, because without doing so, true compassion will not arise within us.
Pöbegda tukukoni nizuriki shebre. Chidanga pöbega pömega tukuda yore ine changboro mangboji yamata ji gebege da tukusamar del doin pömega tukuda changbom mangboji mebazana mazata paji del doin da mebar chikori jeda shashta amara. Dadi zo di 지소 된 저배 아래 삼천도 가르스타나 지소 나로래 아니지 가르르지 부메리아 지 통신다 지구르 샤디 지점식이지 지구르 샤다 다나 신기 슈겐디 지점식 챕침비나 대수지기 아니지 부메리지 주베고다 다나 신기 따지 최소다 우티 진짜 망보지 영화가 딱 간다고 가르치지 고급으로디 마음 주고 하래. 드린 주산다 지당 드린 주산에 텔레양 아주기 폐 미조사르지 분명히 주고 망보지 영 미조사 근데 미세게 가게다. 이제 미세게 야만. 다임비네 다 지소 나로 나라임비는 다지 분명히 대지가 따당로디 대섬시기 다 간다. 가르치다지 positive jo shtasha mevche andrin justa ti gyunsan tene en da ganda khashwe ji phume ga chugu ine mina de samshig mangbo mebe suji andrin mangbo balya da dangi kon shuban na singre phume le ya ta ganda ji khashwe cho yong le de ji ta ganda khashwe kwan zu ji leadership yong ji ki twingen of the pyusum soboji dang yang ta bar ji juba yimina and then 미망 나올리나 통신 지구로 지하디 아니 마로드라 다자와디 이시도 주요.
The next question was about whether the empowerment of women in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition will have an effect on the tulku system, the rebirth, the reborn or reincarnated Lama recognition system. There actually already are female tulkus or reincarnated lamas, but proportionally they are so few compared to the number of male tulkus that you could almost say there aren't any. There actually are some, but they're so few. But this is primarily, I think, for social reasons. And therefore, as women are more empowered, given more respect, more authority, more empowerment, they will naturally have a much greater opportunity to become religious leaders, including the recognition of them as tulkus. There has never been a rule in Tibetan Buddhism that women could not be tulkus, but because the outlook of the society toward women in general was not especially positive, there have been very few. Nevertheless, as you indicated in your question, once women are afforded a full support for leadership roles, there will be more.
Jackie, Losong, and the others, I'm sorry, but I'm cognizant of the time and of the DC traffic, and I want to make sure that we honor His Holiness's schedule and the need for them to depart shortly. But Nancy, if you could take us away.
I just want to thank you again, Your Holiness, for joining us today. We're deeply grateful for the words that you have brought to us, the opportunity for all of us to come together and really reflect again on the importance of compassion and of how we might, both as individuals and in our various organizations, contribute to bringing greater peace to the world and ending violent conflict. And thank you especially for your leadership and real inspiration on bringing women into full ordination. This is the kind of inclusion that globally will have enormous impact. So thank you very much, and on behalf of all of us, we wish you peaceful and wonderful journeys for the rest of your time here in the United States.
Thank you.